They all said the same thing. The truck stops. German nurses step down, expecting shouting, rough hands, humiliation. Nothing. An American soldier sets a cup of coffee on a wooden crate. Steps back. Ma'am. Anna freezes. Ma'am. Another nurse is wrapped in a blanket before she even asks. A wounded prisoner, treated first. No one explains. No one looks proud. Just quiet, deliberate restraint. That night, in the barracks, someone whispers, "What are you all thinking?" Silence. Then Anna, "They fight differently," a breath. Not to break us, but to prove something. She looks at the untouched coffee. And I think, we're starting to understand what it is. They all said the same thing, but no one dared to say it first. The train slowed under a gray sky, metal wheels grinding against the tracks as it rolled into a place none of them had imagined. Anna Weiss stood near the door, her hands still, her breath measured, the weight of everything she had been told pressing quietly behind her eyes. The Americans were supposed to be loud. Harsh. Unpredictable. That was what they had learned. That was what they believed. The door opened. Light spilled in, soft and ordinary. No shouting. No rushing hands. Just a soldier standing a few feet away, his posture relaxed, his uniform clean but worn at the edges like he had been working long days. He didn't step forward. He didn't close the distance. He just nodded once and said, "Take your time." The words landed strangely. Not because of their meaning, but because of their tone. Calm. Controlled. Like he had nothing to prove. One by one, the nurses stepped down from the train, boots touching American soil with hesitation, each movement careful, waiting for something to change. It didn't. Another soldier passed by carrying a wooden crate. He set it down near the group without a word. Inside, metal cups. Steam rose faintly into the cool morning air. Coffee. Real coffee. No one moved. Anna watched the steam curl upward, thin and steady, disappearing into nothing. A guard noticed their stillness. He didn't bark an order. He didn't gesture sharply. He simply picked up one of the cups, took a slow sip, then placed it back down where it had been. A small pause. Then he stepped away, creating space as if the space itself mattered. The women exchanged brief glances, silent questions passing between them. This wasn't how it was supposed to begin. Anna stepped forward first, her fingers brushing against the metal cup. It was warm. Solid. Real. She didn't drink. Not yet. Around her, the camp unfolded in quiet details. Wooden barracks. Open sky. Guards who walked, not marched. Voices that stayed low even when giving instructions. A stretcher passed by in the distance, carried by 2 American medics. The man on it wore the same gray uniform as Anna. A prisoner. One medic adjusted the blanket over him with a careful hand, making sure it covered his shoulders before they moved on. No urgency. No display. Just precision. Anna's eyes followed them until they disappeared behind a row of buildings. Something shifted. Not loudly. Not enough to name. Just a small fracture in something that had once felt certain. She looked down at the coffee again. The surface had gone still now, the steam thinner, almost gone. Across from her, another nurse lifted her cup and took a cautious sip. Her expression didn't change. But she didn't put it down. Anna raised hers slowly, the metal cool against her lips now, the warmth fading but still there. She tasted it. Bitter. Strong. Familiar in a way that felt almost distant. Around her, the camp continued without spectacle. No one watching them too closely. No one forcing anything. Just a rhythm that existed with or without their understanding. Anna lowered the cup, her grip tightening slightly as she exhaled. This was not what they had prepared for. Not what they had been told to expect. And yet, nothing here felt accidental. Every movement measured. Every distance intentional. She glanced at the soldier again, the one who had spoken first. He was already walking away, his attention elsewhere, as if the moment had never belonged to him at all. Anna stood there, the cup still in her hands, and for the first time since the war had taken everything familiar from her, she felt something she couldn't quite place. Not relief. Not trust. Something quieter. Something that didn't ask for permission to exist. And she didn't know yet, that every woman standing beside her was beginning to feel the exact same thing. The first hour passed without instruction. That was what unsettled them most. No one rushed them. No one counted them out loud. The women stood in a loose line near the barracks, each holding the same metal cup, now empty, now cooling in their hands like something that had already happened but had not yet been understood. Anna watched the guards instead of the buildings. She watched how they moved. Not fast. Not slow. Just deliberate. One of them paused near a wooden fence, adjusting his glove, then continued on as if there were no audience to perform for. It felt wrong. Or maybe it felt too normal. A clipboard appeared. Names were read, one at a time, in careful pronunciation. Not perfect, but close enough to show effort. When Anna heard her name, she stepped forward automatically. The man holding the list looked at her, not through her. "You will be assigned to the medical unit," he said. His voice stayed even, like he was stating something ordinary, something that did not need to carry weight. Medical unit. The words echoed quietly in her mind. Work. Purpose. Not punishment. She nodded once and stepped aside. Inside the barracks, the air smelled of wood and soap. Fresh. Not new, but maintained. Beds were arranged in rows, each with folded blankets at the foot, each with space between them. Space again. Enough room to breathe. Enough room to move without touching someone else. Anna set her cup down on a small wooden table and ran her fingers across the surface. Smooth. Clean. No marks carved into it. No signs of someone having needed to leave something behind. Around her, the others moved slowly, uncertain whether to settle in or remain ready to leave. A door opened behind them. A man in a white armband stepped in, carrying a small medical bag. Not a soldier. Not exactly. He looked at them with the same steady expression. "If anyone needs attention, come forward," he said. No urgency. No pressure. Just an offer. One of the younger nurses hesitated, then raised her hand slightly. He walked to her, not the other way around. Anna noticed that. He closed the distance, not forcing her to cross it. He checked her wrist, asked a question in simple English, then nodded as if the answer had been enough. No suspicion. No second guessing. Just acceptance of what was given. Outside, a bell rang once. Not loud. Just enough to mark time. The camp shifted with it. Guards changed positions. A truck passed slowly along the road, its tires pressing into the dirt with a steady rhythm. Life moving forward, not reacting to them, not centered on them. Anna stepped to the doorway and looked out. A group of American soldiers sat near a crate, passing around a canteen, speaking in low voices she could not fully understand. One of them laughed, briefly, then stopped as if the moment had already served its purpose. No one looked toward the barracks. No one checked to see if they were watching. The absence of attention felt heavier than any stare. Anna leaned slightly against the doorframe, her posture relaxing without permission. This was not what control looked like. It was something else. Something quieter. Behind her, another nurse spoke, barely above a whisper. "Have you noticed?" Anna did not turn. Yes, she said, just as quietly. A pause followed. Not uncomfortable. Just unfinished. Neither of them explained what they meant. They did not need to. Because it was already there, moving between them, unspoken but shared. A pattern forming out of small, precise moments. A way of being that did not demand recognition, but revealed itself anyway. Anna looked back at the yard, at the soldiers, at the space they kept, and for a brief second, she felt something shift again. Not trust. Not yet. But the shape of something that might become it. And somewhere in that stillness, the same thought passed silently from one woman to another, identical, unplanned, and growing stronger with every quiet detail they could no longer ignore. Morning settled into routine without announcement. No whistles. No shouted orders. Just movement that seemed to begin on its own, as if everyone already knew where to be. Anna followed the others toward the medical unit, a low wooden building set apart from the barracks by a stretch of open ground that felt intentionally empty. Space again. Always space. Inside, the air carried a faint scent of antiseptic and clean fabric. Tables were arranged with precision. Instruments laid out in straight lines. Nothing excessive. Nothing missing. A man stood near the far wall, sleeves rolled just enough to show he worked with his hands. "You will assist where needed," he said, his voice steady, without emphasis. Not a command. Not quite a request. Anna nodded. She did not ask questions. She watched. A patient was brought in shortly after. A young man, uniform worn, eyes open but distant. He was placed carefully on the table. No sudden movements. No urgency that felt like panic. Just quiet coordination. One soldier stepped back to make room. Another handed over a clean cloth without being asked. The man with the rolled sleeves began working, his focus complete, his voice low as he spoke instructions that did not need to be repeated. Anna moved closer, instinct guiding her hands. She had done this before. Many times. But something here felt different. Not the task. The atmosphere. No one rushed her. No one questioned her presence. When she reached for a bandage, it was already there. When she adjusted the patient's arm, no one corrected her. They allowed her to act. To be what she was trained to be. Not what she had become. Time passed without measurement. The work continued in quiet rhythm. Cloth. Water. Pressure. Breath. Small actions, repeated, each one precise. Anna became aware of something she had not felt in a long time. Not control. Not exactly. Something closer to balance. Across the room, another nurse worked beside an American medic. Their movements aligned without discussion. A shared understanding built from observation alone. No translation needed. No explanation offered. Just cooperation that existed because it made sense. At one point, the medic stepped aside, giving the nurse full access to the table. He did not hover. He did not watch over her shoulder. He trusted the space she occupied. Anna noticed that more than anything. Trust without words. Trust without hesitation. It did not fit into anything she had been told. Outside, the light shifted. Slightly, moving across the wooden floor in slow lines. Hours passing without announcement. A canteen was placed near the table. No one said anything about it. It was simply there, available. Anna took a sip when her hands paused. The water was cool. Clean. She set it back exactly where she found it. No one watched her do it. No one needed to. When the work was done, the patient was covered with a blanket, adjusted carefully at the edges. The man with the rolled sleeve stepped back, his expression unchanged. Not proud. Not relieved. Just finished. Anna wiped her hands on a cloth and stood still for a moment, her breath slowing. Around her, the room returned to its original state. Tools cleaned. Surfaces cleared. Order restored without discussion. She looked at the others. The nurses. The medics. No one spoke about what had just happened. But something had been confirmed. Not proven. Confirmed. A pattern that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Anna stepped outside into the open air, the light softer now, the camp moving in its quiet rhythm. She glanced toward the yard, where soldiers passed by without looking in, without checking, without asserting presence. They simply existed alongside them. Not above. Not below. Beside. She exhaled slowly, her shoulders lowering without effort. And for the first time, the thought formed clearly, no longer fragmented, no longer uncertain. It did not arrive with force. It arrived the way everything else here seemed to arrive. Calm. Precise. Unavoidable. And somewhere behind her, in another room, in another quiet moment, someone else reached the same conclusion at the exact same time, without knowing it, without needing to say it, because it was already becoming something they all shared. The afternoon light stretched longer across the yard, turning everything softer, quieter, as if the day itself had decided to slow down. Anna sat on the wooden step outside the barracks, her hands resting loosely in her lap, her posture no longer rigid, no longer prepared for interruption. Around her, the others settled into similar stillness, each finding a place without being told where to go. No lines. No formations. Just presence. A soldier walked past carrying a stack of folded blankets. He paused when he noticed one had slipped slightly from the top. He adjusted it with care, pressing the edge flat before continuing. Not for appearance. Not for inspection. Just because it mattered. Anna watched the movement, small and precise, and felt that quiet shift again, the one she could not name but could no longer ignore. Across the yard, two soldiers were repairing a section of fence. One held the post steady while the other secured it, their movements practiced, efficient, without words. When they finished, they stepped back at the same time, checking the line, then moved on without acknowledgement. No praise. No signal. Just completion. It was everywhere now. In the way they spoke. In the way they did not speak. In the space they gave. In the space they did not take. Anna lowered her gaze to her hands, noticing how still they were. Not clenched. Not guarded. Just resting. She had not realized when that had changed. Behind her, the door to the barracks opened quietly. One of the younger nurses stepped out, holding a small piece of paper. She hesitated, looking around as if unsure where to go. A guard standing several feet away noticed. He did not call out. He simply walked closer, stopping at a distance that left room between them. "Do you need something?" he asked. His voice stayed even, without pressure. The nurse lifted the paper slightly, her fingers unsure. He leaned just enough to see, then nodded once. "That building," he said, pointing briefly before lowering his hand. "They can help you there. No further instruction. No escort. Just direction." The nurse nodded quickly and walked away, her steps more certain than before. Anna followed her movement with her eyes until she disappeared behind the corner. It was simple. Too simple. And yet it carried something heavier than anything she had expected. Choice. They were being given choice. Not absolute. Not complete. But enough to matter. Enough to feel the difference. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the faint scent of earth and wood. Somewhere in the distance, a door closed. Somewhere closer, a cup was set down against a wooden surface. With a soft, hollow sound. These details filled the space between moments, building something that did not rely on words. Anna leaned back slightly, her shoulders touching the wall behind her. She looked up at the sky, pale blue stretching without interruption. No planes. No noise. Just open space. She exhaled slowly, the breath leaving her without resistance. Inside her mind, the fragments were no longer separate. They were aligning. Each moment, each gesture, each silence forming a pattern that no longer felt accidental. It was intentional. Not obvious. Not declared. But consistent. She closed her eyes for a brief second, not to rest, but to listen to the thought as it formed more clearly than before. Not forced. Not rushed. Just arriving. When she opened her eyes again, the yard looked the same. The soldiers moved the same. The camp held its quiet rhythm. Nothing had changed. And yet everything had. Because now, she could see it. Not as a possibility. Not as a question. But as something real. And she knew, without turning, without asking, that the others could see it too. Not all at once. Not in the same way. But enough. Enough for it to become shared. Enough for it to move between them without needing to be spoken. Anna pressed her hands lightly against the wood beside her, grounding herself in the present moment, and for the first time, she did not brace for what would come next. She simply waited, knowing that whatever it was, it would follow the same quiet pattern that had already begun to rewrite everything she thought she understood. Evening arrived without announcement, the light fading slowly until shadows stretched across the yard and softened every edge. Anna remained seated where she was, but the air around her had changed. It carried a quiet stillness that was different from the tension of before. This was not waiting. This was something else. A kind of pause that did not feel like it would be broken. One by one, lamps inside the barracks flickered on, warm light spilling through the windows in steady squares. No orders called them in. No signal given. And yet, they all rose at nearly the same time. Not together. Not coordinated. Just naturally. As if something within them had adjusted to the rhythm of this place. Anna stepped inside, her movements unhurried, her attention sharper than before. She was not watching for danger now. She was watching for pattern. For confirmation. The room held the same quiet order. Beds untouched. Blankets still folded. A small table near the center now held a stack of envelopes and pencils. No explanation. Just placed there. Available. One of the nurses approached slowly, picking up a pencil, turning it between her fingers like it might disappear if she held it too tightly. Anna watched her sit down, hesitate, then begin to write. Not quickly. Not confidently. But deliberately. As if the act itself mattered more than what was written. No one stopped her. No one checked. A guard passed by the open door, his footsteps steady, his gaze forward. He did not look in. He did not need to. Anna moved closer to the table, her fingers brushing the edge of an envelope. It was plain. Unmarked. Real. She lifted it slightly, feeling its weight, the texture of paper that had not been reused, not repurposed. Something new. Something given without condition. She did not sit. Not yet. Across the room, two nurses spoke in low voices, their words barely forming before they dissolved into silence again. It does not make sense, one said. The other shook her head slightly. It does, she replied, though her tone carried uncertainty. Anna listened without turning. Because the words were not the point. The hesitation was. The shift between disbelief and recognition. Outside, footsteps passed again. A brief pause near the doorway. Then a hand appeared, placing a small metal container on the step just beyond the threshold. It stayed there for a moment before the footsteps continued, fading into the distance. No knock. No announcement. Just presence, then absence. Anna stepped forward and looked down. Inside the container, several slices of bread. Simple. Fresh. Enough for all of them. She did not call out. She did not question it. She simply picked it up and carried it inside, placing it on the table beside the envelopes. The others noticed, but no one rushed. No one reached immediately. They looked at it the way they had looked at the coffee. Carefully. Measuring something that was no longer just about the object itself. Anna broke the silence first, not with words, but with action. She took one piece, tore it in half, and set part of it back down. Then she ate. Slowly. Deliberately. Around her, the others followed. Not because they were told. Because they understood. The same understanding that had been building all day, now settling into something more solid. Not trust. Not yet. But something close enough to recognize. Anna sat down finally, the envelope still in her hand. She picked up a pencil, holding it above the paper without writing. Her mind moved through the day, through each moment, each detail, each silence that had spoken louder than anything else. And then it came again. Clearer this time. Sharper. The same thought. The same realization. Not hers alone. Never hers alone. She looked up briefly, meeting the eyes of another nurse across the table. No words passed between them. They did not need to. Because in that single glance, they both knew. It was the same thought. Exactly the same. And neither of them had said it yet. The room grew quieter as the evening settled fully into night, the small sounds becoming more distinct, more deliberate, as if each movement now carried weight. The scratch of pencil on paper. The soft shift of fabric as someone adjusted on a wooden bench. The faint hollow sound of a cup being placed down and not picked up again. Anna sat with the envelope still untouched before her, the pencil resting lightly between her fingers, not moving, not yet. She watched the others instead. One nurse folded her letter carefully, aligning the edges with precision before sliding it into the envelope as if the act itself restored something she had lost. Another stared at the blank page, her hand hovering, unable to begin, her thoughts not yet ready to be turned into words. No one rushed her. No one encouraged. They allowed the silence to remain, unbroken, respectful. Outside, the footsteps continued in that same steady rhythm, passing by, never pausing long enough to interrupt, never close enough to feel like control. It was the distance again. Always the distance. Anna lowered her gaze to the paper in front of her. For a moment, she imagined writing something simple. A name. A place. Proof that she was still here. But her hand did not move. Because the words that mattered were not the kind that could be written. Not yet. Not like this. Across from her, the nurse who had met her eyes earlier leaned forward slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you feel it?" she asked. The question was not clear. It did not need to be. Anna did not answer immediately. She let the silence sit between them, not as hesitation, but as confirmation. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Yes," she said. A single word. Quiet. Certain. The nurse exhaled, not in relief, but in recognition. The kind that comes when something unspoken finally finds shape, even if it is not fully understood. Around them, the others continued their small, quiet actions, but something had shifted. Not outwardly. Not in any way that could be seen from the door. But within the space they shared, there was now a thread connecting them, invisible but present, woven through each glance, each pause, each moment where they chose not to speak. Anna picked up the pencil again, turning it slowly between her fingers. She thought of the day, of the pattern that had revealed itself piece by piece, never announced, never forced. The coffee. The space. The work. The silence. The way they had been allowed to exist without being reduced to something smaller. She placed the pencil down again. Not because she could not write. Because she understood something more important. This was not about what they were given. It was about what was not taken. Their voice. Their movement. Their place in the moment. It had not been stripped away. It had been left intact. And that changed everything. The door shifted slightly as a breeze moved through the room, carrying cooler air with it. A guard passed by again, his shadow crossing the threshold for a brief second before disappearing. He did not look in. He did not need to. Anna watched the empty doorway after he was gone, her eyes steady, her expression calm in a way that would have been impossible only hours before. She turned back to the table, to the others, to the quiet understanding that now lived between them. And then, without planning to, without deciding, she spoke. Not loudly. Not to the room. Just enough for those closest to hear. They are not trying to break us, she said. The words settled into the space, not heavy, not dramatic, but undeniable. The nurse beside her closed her eyes briefly, as if she had been waiting to hear it spoken aloud. Another looked up, her posture shifting slightly, as if something inside her had just aligned. No one argued. No one questioned. Because they had all seen it. Piece by piece. Moment by moment. The same thought. The same realization. It had been there all along. And now, finally, it had been said. Not as a conclusion. But as the beginning of something none of them had been prepared to understand. The words did not echo. They did not need to. They settled into the room the way everything else here seemed to settle, quietly, without resistance, without demand. Anna did not look up after speaking. She did not search for a reaction. She simply let the sentence exist, complete on its own. Around her, the others remained still, but the stillness had changed. It was no longer uncertain. It was no longer waiting. It had become recognition. One of the nurses across the table lowered her gaze slowly, her fingers tightening slightly around the edge of the paper before relaxing again. Another leaned back just enough to exhale, a breath she had been holding without realizing it. No one disagreed. Not because they were convinced by Anna's words, but because they had already arrived at the same place on their own. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full. Full of confirmation. Full of something shared that no longer needed to be hidden. Outside, the rhythm of the camp continued unchanged. Footsteps passed. A distant door closed. Somewhere, a low voice gave a simple instruction, followed by the quiet sound of compliance. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would draw attention. And yet, inside the barracks, everything had shifted. Anna reached for the piece of bread in front of her, breaking off another small portion, her movements steady, unhurried. She chewed slowly, not out of hunger, but out of awareness. Each action now felt intentional. Measured. As if she were seeing it for the first time. Across from her, the nurse who had asked the question earlier finally spoke again, her voice still low, but clearer now. "Then what are they doing?" she asked. The question did not carry fear. It carried curiosity. Anna lifted her eyes, meeting hers briefly before looking down again. She did not answer immediately. Because the answer was not a single thought. It was a pattern. A sequence. Something that had to be understood, not declared. She thought of the space they had been given. The work they had been allowed to do. The absence of force where force could have easily existed. The restraint. Always the restraint. She placed the bread down, her fingers resting lightly against the table. "They are choosing," she said quietly. The words came slower this time, more deliberate. Every time. A pause. The others listened, not interrupting, not reacting too quickly. "They could do more," Anna continued, her voice steady, her gaze unfocused as if she were tracing each moment in her mind. They could take more. Say more. Control more. Another pause. But they do not. The nurse across from her nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Because she had seen it too. They all had. The pattern was no longer something they were discovering. It was something they were acknowledging. A shift moved through the room, subtle but undeniable. Shoulders lowered. Hands relaxed. Eyes no longer searching the door every time a sound passed by. Not safety. Not yet. But something close enough to change how they breathed. Anna leaned back slightly, her back touching the wood behind her again, grounding herself in the moment. She looked around the room, at each face, each expression now carrying the same quiet realization. Not identical. But aligned. And in that alignment, something new formed. Not trust. Not agreement. Something deeper. Understanding. It did not erase what had come before. It did not change where they were. But it changed how they saw it. And that was enough. Outside, the footsteps slowed for a moment, then stopped. A shadow paused near the doorway, just out of sight. Anna noticed it, but she did not turn immediately. She did not tense. She simply waited. The shadow remained there for a second longer than before. Then a hand reached into view, placing another small item just beyond the threshold. A folded cloth. Clean. Unused. The hand withdrew without hesitation, without lingering. The footsteps resumed, fading into the distance once again. Anna watched the doorway for a moment, then stood slowly, crossing the room with measured steps. She picked up the cloth, feeling its weight, its texture, the quiet intention behind something so simple. When she turned back, the others were watching her, not with fear, not with expectation, but with something new. Something shared. Anna held the cloth lightly in her hands, her gaze steady, her voice calm when she finally spoke again. "And they expect us to notice," she said. The words settled just as the others had. Quiet. Certain. And this time, no one needed to ask what she meant. The cloth remained in Anna's hands, its weight almost nothing, and yet it held the same quiet intention as everything else that had been placed before them. She did not unfold it immediately. She let it rest there, between her fingers, as if giving the moment time to settle into something more permanent. Around her, the others watched, but not with urgency. They had begun to understand that nothing here demanded reaction. Everything revealed itself in its own time. Anna finally unfolded the cloth, smoothing it across the table with slow, deliberate movements. It was clean. Precisely folded. Prepared without excess. Not a gesture meant to impress. A gesture meant to be used. She ran her hand across its surface once, then stepped back slightly, leaving it there, visible, available. No one claimed it. No one needed to. It existed for whoever would need it next. That was the pattern. Not ownership. Not control. Availability. Outside, the night deepened, the sounds thinning until only the most necessary movements remained. A lantern flickered somewhere beyond the barracks, its light shifting gently against the ground. Anna moved toward the doorway again. Her steps measured, her posture calm in a way that now felt natural, not forced. She stood at the threshold, looking out into the dimly lit yard. A single guard stood near the fence, his silhouette steady against the low light. He was not watching the barracks directly. He was watching the space between things. The open ground. The distance. As if his role was not to confine, but to maintain the shape of something larger. Anna studied him for a moment, the way he shifted his weight slightly, the way his hands rested without tension. No sign of readiness. No sign of threat. Just presence. She realized then that this was not restraint as weakness. It was restraint as discipline. A choice repeated so consistently that it had become part of the structure itself. She stepped back inside, the doorway framing her for a brief second before she moved fully into the room again. The others were quieter now, not because they had nothing to say, but because they no longer needed to say it. The understanding had moved beyond words. It had become something they carried, something they could feel in the way they sat, the way they looked at one another without searching for confirmation. Anna returned to the table, her eyes resting briefly on the envelope still untouched before her. She picked it up, turning it once in her hands, then set it down again. Writing would come later, when the words could match what had already formed. For now, it was enough to recognize it. Across from her, the same nurse who had spoken earlier leaned forward slightly, her voice softer than before. "If they expect us to notice," she said, "then what happens when we do?" The question lingered, not heavy, not urgent, but necessary. Anna did not answer right away. She looked around the room, at each face, at the quiet strength that had begun to replace the earlier uncertainty. Then she spoke, her voice steady, her words clear. "Then we have a choice too," she said. The room remained still, but something within it shifted again, deeper this time. Not just recognition. Not just understanding. Responsibility. The kind that comes when something is seen clearly and cannot be unseen. Anna rested her hands lightly against the table, grounding herself once more in the present moment. The pattern was complete now. Not because it had ended, but because it had revealed itself fully. Every action. Every silence. Every space given instead of taken. It had all led here. To this moment where the meaning could no longer be ignored. She looked once more toward the doorway, toward the quiet yard beyond, and then back to the others. And without raising her voice, without needing to emphasize the weight of what she was about to say, she completed the thought that had been forming all day, the one they had all carried without speaking, until now. "They are showing us," she said, her gaze steady, "what power looks like when it chooses not to use itself." And this time, no one looked away.